It's Daybreak Middle East from Dubai and London. Let's talk about the latest data now from Turkey showing that inflation rising further in September to 83.5% on an annualized basis. Simone Foxman is in Doha. I mean, we're almost immune to the 80s, aren't we? But talk us through the data. What's stuck in this latest flash in the 80s?
Well, good morning, guys. There had been this view amongst economists that inflation might eventually abate as we neared the end of the year into 2023. But we're looking at numbers that just keep going up month after month. And even on a month-on-month basis, we're not seeing a real deterioration in the acceleration of the price rise at this point. We've seen month after month of these price rises. We've seen unexpected rate cuts that could continue to fuel inflation higher. We've seen President Erdogan calling for more rate cuts, single digits by the end of the year. And then on top of that, we're hearing about the potential for government stimulus, which could, again, drive inflation higher. Bloomberg economists are just continuing to see inflation likely to move higher, and that ultimately could spark a currency crisis. That's not what we're seeing in the lira yet, just a steady march lower against the U.S. dollar, but watch out for that. Also, watch out for rises in Turkish stocks. They've been seen as an inflation hedge, and we saw a 6.6% rise in the benchmark yesterday. Maybe at least some of that could have been driven by some of these data.
I mean, the risk is that the economy begins to dollarize at a much more aggressive level and kind of see a bit of a replay of what we saw, for example, in Lebanon. What about the Bank of Israel? They hiked interest rates. The policy trajectory from here may be a lot clearer than some of the other central banks.
Yeah, the Bank of Israel Governor Amir Yaron has been very aggressive, and yesterday he talked about how he's front-loading these rate hikes in order to try and stem these long-term inflation expectations. As GDP, as inflation, those numbers both come in higher than expected, and that's what the central bank believes will happen for the rest of the year. If you check out our GTV Go, and this is really what informs the policy of the Bank of Israel, we are at inflation levels that are well above the 1 to 3% target. And Yaron saying yesterday that he doesn't expect this to come down until 2023. Economists also pointing out in the wake of this decision that a weaker shekel actually could get in the way of these attempts to try to dull inflation. That said, the Bank of Israel governor also pointing out that he believes in the medium and long term, the inflation expectations have moderated. He says that's what he sees in the market, and therefore that is a sign that his aggressive monetary policy is working.
And then to Iran, excuse me, Simone, to Iran, the supreme leader there speaking publicly for the first time about protests that are sweeping across the country. I mean, this is a global story. What is his message and what's the reaction been? What are the implications?
Yeah, this is the first time that the Supreme Leader has actually commented on these protests. And while he did say that the death of Mahsa Amini and the custody of the morality police, which really set off these protests half a month ago, was heart-wrenching, he also positioned himself firmly behind security forces who he said had been wronged. He also called these widespread demonstrations planned riots designed by the U.S. and Israel. We are watching an increasing number of protests and demonstrations at universities. In particular, the one at Sharif University of Technology in Tehran has drawn a lot of interest because there was a standoff there between protesters, police, and militia that was very much in focus starting on Sunday. We understand that there were quite a few people arrested. It's unclear just how many people have died at this point. Human rights organizations say the number likely exceeds 130.